The air in the penthouse office of Huo's International was as thin and sharp as shattered glass. From 60 floors up, the city sprawled out like a conquered map, but Mr. Huo saw only enemy territory. Western consortiums, circling like vultures, were systematically dismantling the empire his family had built over 3 generations. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window showed a man of immense power, tailored suit, severe jawline, as that could freeze assets, but inside, anxiety gnawed at his composure. His last resort, a name spoken only in whispers, was his only hope. "She's here, sir," his assistant announced, his voice tight. The doors slid open to reveal a woman who seemed to have wandered in from another world. Ye Qingqing wore a faded denim jacket over a plain t-shirt and work pants smudged with dust. Her hands, resting at her sides, were calloused, her face devoid of makeup, and her hair was pulled back in a simple, severe ponytail. She looked utterly ordinary, a stark anomaly in this temple of wealth and influence. She offered a slight, deferential bow. "You asked to see me, Mr. Huo. I am a casual porter from the East Dock Logistics Hub. I was told the request was urgent." Mr. Huo's gaze was intense, analytical. He waved a hand, dismissing his assistant. He had seen the grainy photograph, read the thin file on the legendary godmother of Jinghai, a phantom who had orchestrated corporate miracles a decade ago, before vanishing completely. This woman matched the photo, but the aura was wrong. It was deliberately, painstakingly wrong. Yet, beneath the humble facade, he felt an unnerving stillness, a depth in her eyes that betrayed a mind of formidable power. "Please," he said, his voice a low gravel, gesturing to the plush leather chair opposite his mahogany desk. "Do not insult my intelligence. The porters at East Dock do not have access to my private line." Aking's expression didn't flicker. She remained standing, a humble servant in the court of a king. "There must be a mistake." He rose, walking around the desk until he stood before her. The sheer force of his presence was enough to make most people flinch, but she was as immovable as a mountain. "There is no mistake," he said, his voice dropping, stripped of all pretense. "Huo's International is on the verge of collapse. They are bleeding me dry, and I am out of moves. I need the woman who dismantled the Vanguard Alliance with a single phone call. I need the godmother." He was close enough now that she could see the fine lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. He was desperate, a drowning man reaching for a phantom. For a moment, a flicker of the woman she once was stirred within her. The strategist, the titan. But she quickly suppressed it. "That life was over. I am afraid I cannot help you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You have the wrong person." Mr. Huo stared at her, a long, heavy silence stretching between them. He had anticipated this denial. He had prepared for it. He took a final, decisive breath. "Then let me make you an offer you cannot refuse," he stated, his words precise and shocking. "A business proposal. Save my company. In return, I will give you everything. Half of my assets, controlling shares, and my hand in marriage. I will make you my wife. A bride price for the salvation of my empire." Yaking's composure finally cracked. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor went through her. Marriage. He wasn't offering a partnership. He was offering a sacrifice, his own. She looked at this powerful man, willing to trade his life and freedom for his legacy, and felt a strange, hollow ache. She lowered her gaze, concealing the storm of thoughts. "Mr. Huo, I appreciate the magnitude of your offer, but I cannot accept. I am a married woman. I have a family, a son. All I desire is a peaceful, ordinary life." She turned and walked away, her footsteps silent on the opulent rug. She didn't look back, leaving him standing alone in his glass tower, a king offering a kingdom to a woman who claimed to be a peasant. The commute home was a descent from one world into another. The sterile chill of his office was replaced by the humid press of bodies on the city bus. The scent of expensive cologne gave way to the smell of sweat and exhaust. Yaking leaned her head against the grimy window. The ache in her shoulders from lifting crates all day a familiar, grounding pain. It was the price of her ordinary life. The memory of Mr. Hewer's desperate eyes and his staggering proposal felt like a dream. Here, in the harsh reality of her existence, she was just a laborer, a wife, a mother. Her apartment building was old, the paint peeling in the hallway. As she put her key in the lock, she paused. Muffled voices drifted from inside, a woman's soft laughter, followed by her husband's low murmur. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, called in her stomach. She pushed the door open. Her mother-in-law, Melin, stood in the cramped entryway, her body language stiff with panic. Yaking, "You're home so early. Why don't you rest in the living room? I'll make you some tea." Melin moved to block the hallway leading to the bedroom. Her smile a desperate, flimsy mask. "Ewan is resting," she added quickly. "He had a long day." The hushed laughter came again, clearer this time. It was a sound Yaking knew intimately, the sound of her adopted sister, Yoshifong. "Move," Yaking said, her voice dangerously quiet. Ignoring her mother-in-law's frantic protests, she pushed past her. The bedroom door was ajar. She shoved it open. The scene that met her eyes shattered the fragile peace she had so carefully constructed. Her husband, Liu Yuan, was shirtless, his arms wrapped around Yoshifong, who was clad only in a silk slip Yaking recognized as own. They broke apart, but without any sense of shame. Yoshifong leaned against Liu Yuan's chest, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Sister, you're home. Don't look so shocked. A man has needs your dusty self can't possibly fulfill." Liu Yuan sneered, his eyes raking over Yaking's work-worn clothes with open contempt. "Look at you, covered in filth. Can you honestly blame me for wanting a real woman? Someone soft and clean. Not a common laborer who smells like the docks." Each word was a deliberate, poisoned dart. The air left Yaking's lungs. The man she had sacrificed everything for, the sister she had raised, this was their gratitude. The betrayal was so absolute, so brazen. It was almost surreal. Before she could form a response, the apartment door swung open again. Her son, Liu Sherlong, burst in, his face alight with excitement, a file clutched in his hand. "Mom! Dad! I got it. I got the job." He beamed, utterly oblivious to the suffocating tension in the room. Aunt Yoshifong. The air in the small apartment was suffocating, thick with the stench of betrayal. Yaking Qing's world had fractured, the pieces lying shattered on the worn linoleum floor along with her dignity. Liu Yuan stood with his arm draped possessively around Yoshifong, his face a mask of defiant arrogance. But Yaking's gaze wasn't on them. It was fixed on her son, Liu Sherlong, who stood hesitantly between the two camps, his expression a turbulent mix of confusion and shame. Her voice, when it came, was a brittle whisper, stripped of all its usual warmth. "Sherlong," she pleaded, her heart a raw, open wound. "Come with me. We can leave this place. We can start over, just the two of us." She extended a hand, calloused and trembling, offering him a future she wasn't even sure she could build. Sherlong flinched away from her touch as if it burned him. He looked from his mother's tired, dust-streaked face to Yoshifong's perfectly manicured nails and gleaming jewelry. "Go where, Mom?" he demanded, his voice cracking with the cruelty only a teenager can muster. "To another construction site. To live in a room even smaller than this one." "What can you give me?" He gestured around the cramped space, his face contorting with disgust. "What can you possibly provide for me beyond manual labor?" The words struck Yaking with more force than a physical blow. The infidelity of her husband and the treachery of her adopted sister were sharp, painful cuts. But this was a mortal wound to her very soul. Her own child, the boy she had carried, nurtured, and worked her fingers to the bone for, saw her not as a mother, but as an embarrassment. He had sided with them, with the gloss and the lies. Yushafong seized the moment, her lips curling into a smug smile. Listen to your son, Yaking. He's a smart boy. He knows you can barely feed yourself moving bricks all day. What makes you think you can provide for him? She can't, Li Yuan added, his tone dripping with condescension. Her place is in the dirt. Our son deserves better. Yaking's gaze remained locked on Xiaolong, searching his eyes for a flicker of the boy she had raised. A shred of loyalty. She found nothing but a cold reflection of his father's ambition. The despair that had threatened to drown her moments before began to recede, replaced by glacial calm. The trembling in her hands stopped. Her spine straightened. I see, she said, her voice dropping to a low, steady tone that held a dangerous new weight. She looked at the three of them: the husband who had discarded her, the sister who had stolen her life, and the son who had just broken her heart. A steely resolve, forged in the fires of this ultimate betrayal, hardened in her eyes. You want proof that I can provide? Her gaze lingered on Xiaolong. Then you will have it. I will prove what I am capable of, and I swear, every single one of you will live to regret this day. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving behind the ruins of her 15-year marriage. She didn't have a plan, only a burning, righteous fury. It carried her across the city, from the grimy industrial district to the manicured, tree-lined streets of the city's most exclusive enclave. It carried her to the gates of the Ye family mansion, the place she had once called home. The opulent hall, with its soaring ceilings and cold marble floors, felt alien to her now. Her biological parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ye, sat on a silk brocade sofa, sipping tea as if she were a mere business appointment. Yushafong was already there, perched beside them, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Mr. Ye asked, his voice devoid of any paternal warmth. I'm here for what is mine, Yaking stated, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. The inheritance my grandmother left for me, the portfolio and assets that were to be held in your care until I came of age. I'm here to claim it. Her mother let out a disdainful scoff. Inheritance, after you disgraced this family by running off with a worthless security guard. You forfeited any claim to our name and our money the day you walked out that door. She's right, Mr. Ye said, his eyes as cold as stone. Yushafong has been the dutiful daughter. She is the one who has upheld the family's honor. You are no longer a part of this family, Yaking. You have nothing here. They had made their choice, unequivocally siding with the daughter who had brought them prestige over the one who brought them perceived shame. Yaking's last sliver of hope for a familial connection died. Yushafong, sensing her victory, let her hand drift to her teacup, deliberately flaunting the enormous diamond ring that now adorned her finger. It glittered under the chandelier, a cruel, blinding star. Is this what you're looking for, sister? Yushafong purred, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. She twisted her hand, making the facets catch the light. Father was so generous. He said a successful daughter deserved a few beautiful things. It's amazing what a portion of a forgotten fortune can buy. The ring wasn't just a ring. It was Yaking's stolen future, her grandmother's legacy, melted down and remade into a symbol of her sister's triumph. Rage, pure and white-hot, surged through Yaking, but her expression remained a placid mass. Then this is a clean break, she announced, her voice resonating with an unnerving finality. She looked at her parents, then at the woman who had replaced her. From this moment on, I have no father, No mother and no sister. The Ye family is nothing to me. Yushifeng laughed, a high, piercing sound that grated on the nerves. A clean break. You have nothing, Ye King. You've been abandoned by your husband, your son, and now us. What future could you possibly have? What kind of support could you find? Tell me. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. What man would ever want a broke, disowned, middle-aged brick mover now? The scent of old leather and rain-lashed glass filled Mr. Huo's private study. He stood by the panoramic window, watching the city lights bleed into the slick, dark streets below. The reflection showed a man teetering on the edge of ruin, the formidable CEO reduced to a gambler on his last chip. When the door opened, he turned, his face a mask of strained composure. Ye Qingqing entered not with the timid deference of a janitor, but with the unnerving stillness of a predator. She had shed the guise of the downtrodden woman he'd seen humiliated at the construction site. In its place was an unnerving quietude, a cool energy that seemed to absorb the room's ambient anxiety. The grand ballroom of the Jiangshen Imperial Hotel was a universe of shimmering crystal and hushed, self-important laughter. Lu Yuan, his chest puffed out in a tailored suit, surveyed the scene with the air of a man who had finally arrived. Beside him, Yushifeng was a vision of borrowed elegance, her hand linked proprietarily with his. Her son, Lu Xiaolong, trailed them, his face a mask of smug anticipation. Tonight was his coronation. Tonight the Huo Group was set to announce his promotion. They navigated the elite crowd, basking in the reflected glow of their own fabricated success, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Then, the great double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. A collective, interim breath seemed to pull the sound from the room. A woman stood silhouetted against the light of the ground hall, a figure of such arresting grace that conversation faltered and heads turned as one. She wore a gown of midnight velvet, a cascade of starlight that clung to her form, her hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck, adorned with a single, breathtaking diamond necklace that drank the light. As she stepped forward, a wave of disbelief rippled through the room. Lu Yuan's smile froze, his champagne flute hovering halfway to his lips. Yushifeng's eyes widened, a flicker of pure, venomous shock in their depths. Lu Xiaolong simply stared, his mouth agape. It was Ye Qingqing, but it was not the weary, defeated woman they had cast out. This was a phoenix rising, her posture radiating a power they had never imagined she possessed. They watched, paralyzed, as she bypassed the city's most influential figures. They thought she was making a beeline for them, a desperate plea for reconciliation. Instead, she glided toward a small, awkwardly clustered group of men and women near the service entrance, her old friends from the construction site, dressed in their Sunday best. Brother Kong, Sister Lin. Ye Qing's voice was warm, devoid of any pretense. She embraced them, a velvet gown brushing against their simple, clean press suits. "I'm so glad you could come." A fresh wave of murmurs, this time laced with disdain, swept through the ballroom. Yushifeng let out a relieved, scornful laugh. "Look at her," she whispered to Lu Yuan, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "She rents a dress and still surrounds herself with filth. She's putting on a pathetic show." Lu Yuan nodded, his composure returning, of course. It was a charade, a desperate, final attempt to cling to a world she could never belong to. But Ye Qing seemed not to hear them. After ensuring her friends had drinks, she turned, her gaze sweeping across the room until it landed on the main stage. With a serene confidence that defied all explanation, she ascended the small set of stairs. The band, mid-song, faltered and fell silent as she gracefully took the microphone from its stand. The spotlight found her, isolating her in a pool of brilliant white. The entire ballroom held its breath. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm and clear, amplified through the grand hall. It carried a resonance of authority that no one had ever heard from her before. I know many of you are wondering who I am and why I've taken the stage. You were invited here tonight under the pretense of a hero group celebration. That was a partial truth. She paused, letting the silence stretch, her eyes finding her former family in the crowd. Their faces were now pale with a dawning, sickening sense of dread. The full truth, Yaking continued, her voice hardening with an edge of steel, is that you are all guests of the Ye family, my family. My name is Yaking Ching, though some of you may know me by another title, the business godmother. And I'm your host for this evening. A collective gasp set the air from the room. The silence that followed was absolute. A thick, heavy blanket of shock. Then, chaos erupted. She's insane. Yoshifong shrieked, her carefully constructed composure shattering. Someone get security. This woman is a delusional fraud. Liu Yuan, his face ashen, rushed to her side. It's true, we know her. She's my ex-wife. A penniless nobody we took pity on. She's lost her mind. Yaking watched them, an unreadable, almost pitying expression on her face. She held up her hand, and the uproar quieted. The crowd, caught between confusion and morbid curiosity, turned their attention back to her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her gaze locked onto Liu Yuan. You say you took pity on me, she asked, her voice dangerously soft. Do you remember, Liu Yuan, when your construction business was nothing but a stack of debt? Do you remember who spent 3 years, day and night, building the networks and securing the contracts that made you your first fortune? Was that pity? She turned to her adoptive parents, who were shrinking behind the crowd. And you told me I was a disgrace to the Qing family, that my name was worthless. You disowned me to secure a business deal with Yoshifong. A deal that, I can assure you, is now void. Finally, her eyes, now as cold and sharp as chips of ice, settled on Yoshifong. You believed you could steal my life, my husband, even my son's affection. You thought my legacy was yours for the taking. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the ballroom. You were wrong. She took a deliberate step forward, her presence on the stage immense, dominant. I will ask you all one last time, she said, her gaze sweeping over Liu Yuan, Yoshifong, and her parents. Liu Yuan, are you absolutely sure you want a divorce? She looked at her parents. Are you sure you want to disown me? Her eyes landed on Liu Xiaolong, whose face was contorted in a mask of fear and confusion. And you, Xiaolong, were you sure you no longer want me as your mother? Their stunned silence was her answer. A chilling, serene smile touched Yaking's lips. Very well. She nodded to someone off stage. The massive screen behind her, which was supposed to display a glowing tribute to Liu Xiaolong, flickered to life. It wasn't a promotional video. It was a cold, official document stamped with the Hero Group's imposing letterhead. Official notice of termination employee. Liu Xiaolong reason. Gross misconduct and violation of corporate ethics. Effective. Immediately, Liu Xiaolong's legs gave out. He stumbled backward, his face a canvas of utter horror. This was not happening. It was a nightmare. Before the crowd could fully process the shock, the screen changed again. This time, it displayed a series of damning emails, bank statements, and internal audits. Yoshifong's name was on every single one, detailing a long history of embezzlement, kickbacks, and corporate espionage within the Hero Group's subsidiary projects. Her face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers trembling as she frantically dialed her contacts, her powerful allies. Each call went straight to voicemail. The lines of power she had so carefully cultivated had been severed, all at once. Her influence had evaporated into thin air. Xiaolong's termination was my first order of business upon reviewing his performance file. Yaking announced into the microphone, her voice a blade of cold, precise justice. And Yoshifong, all that evidence of your corruption. It was I who anonymously delivered it to the Huo Group's board of directors 2 weeks ago. I simply gave them the tools to uncover the rot you had festered within their company. She looked directly at Liu Yuan, whose entire body was shaking. Your company, Liu Yuan, is currently under emergency audit for its fraudulent partnerships with Yoshifong. By morning, you will have nothing left. The wealth you built on my back, to status you stole, I am taking it all back. Piece by piece, the grand ballroom had become a courtroom, and the city's elite, the jury, they stared at the crumbling family, their whispers turning from confusion to condemnation. The humiliation was absolute, a public execution of their pride and their future. Liu Yuan stared at the woman on the stage, the ghost of his past, now the architect of his ruin, and saw for the first time not the meek wife he had discarded, but a queen in her throne room. Passing a final, irrevocable sentence, Yoshifong let out a choked, desperate sob, the sound swallowed by the vast, silent judgment of the room. Yaking's face held no triumph, only a quiet, profound finality. Her work was done. As the first reporters began to push through the crowd, their cameras flashing like lightning, a tall, impeccably dressed figure emerged from the wings of the stage. Mr. Huo moved to her side, his presence a silent, unwavering testament to her power. He gently took the microphone from her hand, his expression one of deep, undisguised admiration. The war was over, and Yaking Qing had won. The last echoes of Yaking Qing's revelations faded into the vast, gilded ballroom, leaving a silence so profound it felt heavier than any sound. The air, once crackling with champagne-fueled chatter, was now thick with stone reverence. Shards of a dropped flute lay like fallen stars on the marble floor, a testament to the moment the world had fractured. The disgraced Liu Jian and the venomous Xia Mili were gone, escorted out like common criminals, their legacy dissolving into a sordid headline for tomorrow's society pages. All that remained was the quiet aftermath, a tableau of frozen guests staring at the woman they had once dismissed as a cleaner, a ghost, a nobody. But Yaking Qing was no ghost. She was the architect of this ruin, standing posed and radiant in her simple, but impeccably tailored dress. A lone lighthouse against a sea of shocked faces. Across the room, separated by a chasm of his own making, Liu Shalom stood paralyzed. The sharp suit that had once been his armor now felt like a cage. His face, usually a mask of arrogant confidence, was pale and drawn, his eyes fixed on the woman he had so cruelly disdained, his mother. The word was a foreign object in his mind, coated in the shame of 100 dismissive remarks, 1,000 moments of filial neglect. A cleaner like you wouldn't understand. Stay out of my affairs. You have nothing to offer. Why are you even here? You're an embarrassment. The memories assaulted him, each one a fresh wound. He had worshipped a false idol in his father and despised the very foundation upon which his privileged life was built. He had rejected her not just as a mother, but as a person, deeming her worthless. And now, that worthless person was revealed to be the silent, unacknowledged goddess of the business world, the very titan he had aspired to become. The weight of his foolishness, of his blind, pathetic cruelty, was a physical force, crushing the air from his lungs. His hands trembled, not with rage, but with a regret so deep it was hollowing him out from the inside. The word escaped his lips, a broken, desperate whisper that barely carried across the silent room. It was the plea of a lost child, not a grown man. It was the sound of a world crumbling. Yaking's gaze met his. For a single, breathtaking second, the formidable CEO vanished, and only a mother remained. A flicker of profound, maternal pain crossed her features, the ghost of a love that had been starved and rejected. Her heart, a fortress of steel for the past hour, felt the phantom sting of his betrayal, but the moment passed as quickly as it came. Her expression hardened again, not with coldness, but with resolute purpose. This pain was his to carry. This lesson, brutal as it was the only thing that could forge him into a man of substance rather than a boy of privilege. She had given him everything once. Now, she had to let him find his own worth in the ashes of his pride. With a slow, deliberate finality, she turned her head, her gaze sweeping past him as if he were just another stranger in the crowd. The cut was clean, deep, and necessary. As Liu Xiaolong visibly flinched from the silent dismissal, another figure began to move, Mr. Huo, who had stood near the edge of the stage like a silent guardian, started walking toward her. He moved with an unhurried, magnetic grace, the stunned assembly of elites parting before him like the Red Sea. His eyes never left Yaking. There was no shock in his expression, only a deep, burning admiration that bordered on reverence. He had come seeking a legend to save his company. He had found a queen reclaiming her throne. He stopped just before her, the subtle scent of his sandalwood and bergamot cologne cutting through the stale air of the ballroom. His voice was low, yet it commanded the attention of everyone present. Yaking Cheng, he said, the name rolling off his tongue with a respect that was its own form of tribute. When I first sought out the business godmother, I was told she was a myth, a phantom who could reshape markets with a single decision. I came seeking a partner to save an empire. He paused, his gaze intensifying, capturing hers completely. But I found so much more. I found a woman of impossible strength, who endured the lowest depths of society not as a victim, but as an observer. I saw a brilliant mind hiding in plain sight, a diamond disguised as a stone. My proposal was for a business alliance. He took a breath, his next words resonating with absolute sincerity. It no longer is. That is not enough. He extended his hand. It was a strong, steady hand, a hand that had built fortunes and commanded boardrooms, but now it was offered in gentle supplication. I am not looking for a consultant, Yaking. I am looking for an equal, an empire's best built by the sovereigns, not a king and his consort. I am asking you to build one with me, in business and in life. Will you accept my proposal now? The question hung in the air, a beacon of hope after a long and brutal war. Yaking looked at his outstretched hand, then into his eyes. She saw no pity there, no opportunism. She saw only a man who looked at her, truly saw her, and recognized the sum of all her parts. The forgotten wife, the grieving mother, the humble cleaner, and the formidable CEO. He didn't want one without the others. He wanted all of her. A serene smile, the first genuine, unburdened smile she had worn in years, bloomed on her face. The tension in her shoulders, a weight she had carried for a decade, finally dissolved. The past was a landscape of ghosts and grievances, but his hand was a bridge to a new world. Her fingers, no longer calloused from harsh detergents but still bearing the memory of that labor, curled around his. His grip was firm, warm, an anchor in the swirling currents of her new reality. Yes, she said, her voice clear and calm. Yes, I will. Just as their hands clasped, a sudden, joyous noise erupted from the back of the ballroom, near the service corridors. It wasn't the polite, restrained applause of the city's elite. It was a raucous, heartfelt, unfiltered explosion of cheers. Her friends, the security guard old Wong, the dishwasher Sister Lee, the young busboy Feng, all the people who had shown her kindness when she had nothing, were there. They had watched the entire drama unfold from the shadows, their faces a mixture of disbelief and fierce pride. Auntie Cheng, Feng yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. You did it. Sister Lee was weeping openly, clapping so hard her hands must have stung. We knew it. We knew you were special, that honest, unvarnished jaw was the true validation. It wasn't the approval of the millionaires she had just stunned. It was the love of the people who had shared their meager meals with her, who had listened to her worries, who had known her simply as Yeking. Their cheers were the real coronation music. Mr. Huo smiled, squeezing her hand gently as he leaned closer. Is voice a murmur for her ears only? It seems your reign has already begun. Yeking Ching stood tall, her hand firmly in his, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She saw the glittering chandeliers, the dumbstruck faces of high society, a son's broken figure, and the radiant, tear-streaked faces of her loyal friends. She was no longer a woman of two worlds, but the master of one, a world of her own making. The business godmother had returned, not just to claim her empire of glass and steel, but to embrace a new one, built on truth, loyalty, and a love that saw her for everything she was. Turning with Mr. Huo, she walked toward the grand ballroom exit, leaving the wreckage of her old life behind her. The whispers of her past of betrayal and heartache were finally silenced, replaced by the promise of a triumphant new era.